Art? Science? You seem to have paid a fairly high price for your happiness. Anything else? Religion, of course. There used to be something called God, before the 9 Years' War. But I was forgetting. You know all about God, I suppose. Well, it's a subject that has always had great interest for me. You've never read this, for example. The Holy Bible. Nor these.
The Imitation of Christ and the Varieties of Religious Experience by William James.
And I've got plenty more. A whole collection of pornographic old books. God in the safe and Ford on the shelves. But if you know about God, why don't you tell them? For the same reason as we don't give them Othello. They're old. They're about God hundreds of years ago. Not about God now. But God doesn't change. Men do, though. What difference does it make? All the difference in the world. There was a man called Cardinal Newman. A cardinal was kind of a arch community songster. I, Pandulf of Fermelon, a cardinal. I've read about them in Shakespeare. Of course you have. Well, as I was saying, there was a man called Cardinal Newman. And while I'm about it, it'll take this one too. It's by a man called Maine de Biron. He was a philosopher, if you know what that was. A man who dreams of fewer things than there are in heaven and earth. Quite so. I'll read you one of the things he did dream of in a moment. Meanwhile, listen to what this old arch community songster said. We are not our own any more than what we possess is our own. We did not make ourselves. We cannot be supreme over ourselves. We are not our own masters. We are God's property. Is it not our happiness to view the matter? Is it any happiness or any comfort to consider that we are our own? It may be thought so by the young and prosperous. These may think it a great thing to have everything as they suppose, their own way, to depend on no one, to have to think of nothing out of sight, to be without the irksomeness of continual acknowledgement, continual prayer, continual reference of what they do to the will of one another. But as time goes on, they, as all men, will find that independence was not made for men, that it is an unnatural state. Will do for a while, but will not carry us on safely to the end. Take this for an example. A man grows old, he feels in himself that radical sense of weakness, of listlessness, of discomfort, which accompanies the advance of age, and, feeling thus, imagines himself merely sick, lulling his fears the notion that this distressing condition is due to some particular cause, from which, as from an illness, he hopes to recover. Vain imaginings! That sickness is old age, and a horrible disease it is. They say that it is the fear of death and what comes after death that makes men turn to religion as they advance in years. But my own experience has given me the conviction that, quite apart from such terrors or imaginings, the religious sentiment tends to develop as we grow older. To develop because as the passions grow calm, as the fancy and sensibilities are less excited and less excitable, our reason becomes less troubled in its working, less obscured by the images, desires, and distractions in which it used to be absorbed. Whereupon God emerges as from behind a cloud. Our soul feels, sees, and turns towards the source of all light. Turns naturally and inevitably, for now that all that gave the world of sensations its lives and charms has begun to leak away from us. Now that phenomenal existence is no more bolstered by the impressions from within or from without, we feel the need to lean on something that abides, something that will never play us false, a reality, an absolute and everlasting truth. We inevitably turn towards God, for this religious sentiment is of the nature so pure, so delightful to the soul, that it experiences it, that it makes it up to us for all other losses. Of the numerous things in heaven and earth that these philosophers didn't dream about was this, us, the modern world. You can only be independent of God while you've got youth and prosperity. Independence won't take you safely to the end. Well, we've got youth and prosperity right up to the end. What follows? Evidently, that we can be independent of God. The religious sentiment will compensate for all our losses. But there aren't any losses for us to compensate. Religious sentiment is superfluous. And why should we go hunting for a substitute for the youthful desires when the youthful desires never fail? A substitute for the distractions when we go enjoying all the old fooleries to the very last. What need have we of repose when our minds and bodies continue to delight in activity? Of consolation when we have soma? Of something immovable when there's a social order?